Chapter 23. The Twins. July 11th, 1973 began like any other summer day. Sunlight creeping across peeling window frames, the world thick with the hum of cicadas and the distant clatter of neighborhood kids on their bikes. Brenda, ever the early riser, moved through her morning ritual with well-practiced precision. She had her coffee, barely strong enough to stand a spoon in, laced with just a dash of determination. Today, like yesterday and likely tomorrow, she'd make her way to Kmart, that red and blue beacon of bargains and fluorescent lights, ready to tackle another shift in the legendary cash cage. Now, the cash cage was no ordinary workplace. It was a realm of receipts and register tapes, the air swirling with the scent of fresh paper and the distant jingle of coins. Brenda's job was part numbers game, part magic trick. She would carefully count and recount the previous night's cash, smoothing out every crumpled bill and balancing the books with a focus that would put a chess grandmaster to shame. No amount of early morning chaos on the sales floor fazed her. She was the quiet storm, steady and precise as she tallied up the day's haul. But the balancing act didn't end when Brenda clocked out. By night, the cash cage at Kmart was traded for the even more treacherous landscape, the family checkbook. Each line item a small drama, rent, groceries, a doctor's bill that always seemed to show up uninvited. With both paychecks arriving like unlikely guests at the end of the month, it was a minor miracle if the balance hovered above zero. Most months red ink had the starring role. So out came the scissors for coupons and the calculator for dreams. Brenda was determined to make the impossible math work one more time with little help from her reckless husband, yours truly, who spent money on things he couldn't afford. It was stressful, sure, but we learned to laugh at the absurdity, patching the holes in the budget with hope and a stubborn kind of love. Brenda was now 5.5 months pregnant with our first child, and to say we were rookies would be an understatement. The world of pregnancy had already thrown us a few curveballs, cravings at midnight, sudden tears at commercials, and the mounting anxiety of buying baby furniture we couldn't afford. Thank goodness for gifts from family, especially the rocking chair Brenda wanted to calm the new baby. But the previous month ratcheted everything up a notch. Brenda's maternity checkup didn't just bring routine news, it brought excitement that kicked in the door and made itself at home. That's when the doctor smiled and nonchalantly announced, "You're having twins." You could have knocked us over with a feather. Sure, Brenda had grown to a size that made doorways a hazardous adventure, but twins? It never crossed our minds. Suddenly, all Brenda's exhaustion made perfect sense. My wife, who normally buzzed through life fast enough to leave scorch marks on the carpet, was now napping in the afternoons and yawning before dinner. I was starting to worry. The Energizer bunny I'd married had slowed to a gentle putter. Every week I'd poke and prod her to schedule another doctor's visit, just to be safe. Of course, Brenda, ever the optimist, brushed off my concerns with a smile and a wave. She'd always been the glass-half-full kind of gal, while I admittedly could spot a cloud in a clear blue sky. This became our new inside joke, her cheerfully expecting twice the snuggles and I quietly calculating diaper expenses. But as new we were to this whole adventure, one thing was certain. We were in it together, ready or not, and already loving the two little surprises growing with every heartbeat. Wednesdays are supposed to be routine, maybe even a little boring, but this one, from the very start, had me on edge. Brenda, usually the sturdy ship in any storm, was pale as a winter morning and sluggish in a way that set every alarm bell ringing in my head. Dropping her off at Kmart, I tried not to hover, but I couldn't help myself. My parting words were laced with worry. "Promise me you'll call if you feel worse. I'll be there in a flash." She agreed, half smiling, as if trying to reassure me and herself at the same time. The universe, it seems, took me up on my offer. I was barely settled behind my desk at the Hallmark store, just a stone's throw away across the street, when the phone rang. Brenda's voice was thin, barely above a whisper. "Can you come get me?" In that instant, my heart somersaulted into my throat. I didn't waste a second. I called her doctor's office, voice steady but urgent, insisting Dr. Whitman see her immediately because something was very wrong. Keys in hand, I tore out of the store and bolted through the mall, zigzagging past customers with the grace and desperation of a Chicago Bears running back on game day, each step fueled by a tidal wave of worry and adrenaline. Seeing her waiting at Kmart's entrance, doubled over in pain, wiped away any last hope that this was just a bad day. I threw her arm over my shoulder and half carried her to the car, my brain already speeding past home and straight to the doctor's office. She protested, of course. Brenda always insisted she could tough it out, but this time I planted both feet and refused to budge. Sometimes love means drawing a hard line, even if it means a squabble in the parking lot while the world whirls around you. Deep down, I knew something was truly wrong, and this was no time to gamble with her health. When we stumbled through the clinic doors, everything changed in an instant. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead as the nurse vaulted into action, her calm face belied by the urgency in her movements. Code red, no question about it. Before I could swallow the lump in my throat, a doctor, barely older than myself, swept Brenda onto a gurney. My heart hammered against my ribs. Brenda was deep in labor, and our first baby was already fighting its way into the world, months ahead of schedule. It was determined she needed to have a cesarean C-section to deliver our babies. There was a moment, brief but searing, when the doctor tried desperately to push the first baby back, like he could somehow convince time to rewind or fate to wait. His face told the story: terror, uncertainty, the weight of responsibility heavier than any medical textbook could prepare him for. My eyes darted around, frantic. "Where's Dr. Whitman?" I demanded, hoping for the veteran's steady presence. The answer landed like a punch. He'd dashed off for a handball game at the Y, minutes before we'd burst in. Rage flared inside me. He'd been warned we were coming, and yet he was gone. With the delivery now unstoppable, the young doctor, who identified himself as Jeff, the new intern assistant, called for an ambulance, and suddenly Brenda was whisked away, leaving me chasing behind to the hospital. After arriving, time ground to a halt, and I was left stranded in the shifting shadows of the hospital waiting room. All I could do was pace and pray, mind spiraling as I imagined the worst. Brenda's life on a knife's edge, my two tiny children entering a world they weren't ready for. The fear was suffocating, a darker dread than anything I'd faced under enemy fire in Vietnam. I knew I had to brace myself, to be strong and clear-headed for whatever was coming. But as I waited, the reality crashed down. I was utterly powerless, swept along by currents I could neither fight nor flee. The waiting room was thick with the kind of silence that presses in on your chest, making it hard to breathe. An eternity later, the intern finally entered. His face told me more than I wanted to know before he even opened his mouth. He sat across from me. No desk, no buffer, just the truth between us. Brenda was in serious trouble. She'd lost a frightening amount of blood and was already in intensive care. His words felt distant and muffled, like I was underwater, and just as I thought I could process the blow, he pressed on. 2 baby girls, premature, and their chances, next to none. The world I'd built, the family I dreamed of, felt like it was crumbling right at my feet. I asked him, desperate, if there was any hope for our girls. He didn't sugarcoat it. 1 in 100, he said. It might as well have been 1,000,000 to 1. And yet, sitting in that uncomfortable, too bright room, I realized I couldn't just give up. He said their only hope was to immediately be flown by helicopter to Peoria and the Methodist Medical Clinic specialized in premature babies. There was a needed moment, time to steady my heart, gather my thoughts, call out for a little help from above. Reality hit again. If our twins survived, there might be lifelong challenges, blindness, brain damage, health problems that would follow them and us forever. My mind raced through all the worst-case scenarios, but in the end it didn't matter. It was out of my hands. I chose to hope. When the decision came, it was clear and resounding. Fly them to Peoria. Do everything you can. I couldn't let them go without a fight. Can I see Brenda? I managed, needing her presence, even if she couldn't help me choose. The doctor's eyes met mine, honest and heavy. He told me I could see Brenda, briefly. She wasn't yet awake from the surgery, and they needed to stabilize her. She still wasn't out of trouble and was in intensive care. Then he admitted it was his first delivery and he'd tried so hard. The pain of that admission stung, especially knowing someone with more experience should have been there. But right then all that mattered was Brenda, the girls, and holding on to the sliver of hope that somehow, against all odds, we'd find our way through. Before they whisked the babies away, I asked if I could see them just for a moment. My daughters, whose futures now hung by a thread. The doctor's face tightened as he warned me one was badly bruised. He admitted with a kind of raw honesty. When the twins were brought out to me, my heart ricocheted inside my chest like it was trying to catch up with the moment. There they were, wheeled out in a sturdy metal hospital crib, their little worlds contained, but their presence anything but small. Identical, right down to their button noses, and those irresistible dimples that beautifully dented their cheeks. Even the tiny clefts in their chins were perfect echoes of their mother's beautiful face. Sure, one of them bore deep bruises, and their skin looked ghostly fragile, almost transparent, but both squirmed defiantly, fighters from the first breath. In that instant, I knew there was nothing on this spinning planet I wouldn't do for them. Debt, bring it on. Sleepless nights, sign me up. They were two little Brendas, and my heart expanded to make room for a love twice as wide, twice as fierce. Leaving Brenda while she was recovering wasn't easy, not by a long shot. She lay resting, wrapped in the hush of deep sleep, with nurses murmuring that her odds were improving. Yet I felt pulled in two directions, one hand reaching for her, the other for our daughters. Peoria called to me, less than an hour down the road, but the distance felt like a universe. I needed a sign, some small signal that Brenda would pull through, that our story together wasn't finished. Still, if I couldn't anchor myself at her bedside, the only place I could be was with those tiny miracles fighting in their crib. Thus began my pilgrimage, one heart, two destinations, and a path that would soon become as familiar as my own reflection. When I touched base with my home office, I braced myself for the worst, but was met with nothing but compassion. My employer didn't bat an eye. Take as much time as you need, he said, and genuinely meant it. That support was a lifeline in the chaos of uncertainty, a rare moment when work felt less like a machine and more like a family. For a fleeting moment I let myself breathe, thinking maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. But life, as it turns out, has a knack for tossing curveballs when you least expect them. When I sifted through the fine print of our company insurance plan, my jaw hit the floor. A bombshell, out of nowhere. The policy only covered the birth of one child. Any expense for the other was squarely on my shoulders. And if that wasn't enough to make my head spin, the mounting bills at the Peoria clinic were entirely my responsibility. Debt loomed over us like a storm cloud, promising thunder for years to come. But I refused to let fear win. One way or another, I would weather this financial hurricane. Determined, not defeated. At the Peoria Preemie Clinic, time stretched and snapped as I pressed my forehead against the glass window, powerless and aching. My twin girls lay cocooned in those tiny cribs, each watched over by a nurse wielding a handheld breathing pump, heroes with angel wings disguised in scrubs. Every beep, every flutter of movement became a lifeline. And yet I could only stand there, helpless as my daughters waged their fierce battle for one more breath. I'd seen wounded Marines wrestle with the ugliest injuries war could offer, but nothing prepared me for the raw terror of watching my babies fight for existence, second by agonizing second. My heart shattered with every tremor of their fragile bodies, an agony words can't capture. Later that night, pushing open the door to Brenda's hospital room felt like slipping through a crack in reality. Nothing was as it should have been. There she was, fighting her own battle, still unaware of all the chaos around her. Tears streaked down my face as I poured out my fears, the what-ifs, the not-yets. She just listened, her gaze brimming with hope for babies she hadn't even had the chance to hold. In the morning, I found myself wandering the highway in front of our apartment. The world was silent and cold, except for the faint hum of traffic and my own thoughts. I drifted toward the cemetery down the road, a place I'd never paid much attention to before. Passing a tiny gravestone, I felt an ache so raw it nearly buckled my knees. Hopelessness and fury washed over me in waves. This wasn't a reality I'd ever imagined, a world where babies didn't come home, where parents left cemeteries with arms aching and empty. I stood before that sleeping angel, desperate for answers that would never come, the silence pressing in until I thought I'd shatter. Each step back to our apartment built a storm within me. How could God have carried me through the chaos of Vietnam, dodging death, surviving against all odds, only to let this nightmare unfold in my own backyard? The injustice gnawed at me, twisting every memory of survival into something bitter and jagged. Anger simmered in my chest, my prayers unraveling into curses. And then the darkness came, every thought poisoned by rage. Dr. Whitman, once the picture of trust and competence, had handed Brenda's care off to some rookie intern more interested in a game of handball than my wife's life. The betrayal burned deeper than any enemy fire I'd faced overseas. No enemy had ever hurt me like this. The pain curdled into something darker, a vow that if anything happened to my girls, I'd track Whitman down myself. In that moment, fury eclipsed faith, and I stood alone in the wreckage of trust. In retrospect, I kept repeating over and over that I'd be no help to my family if I ended up behind bars. After checking in with Brenda, I began the long, nerve-wracking drive back to Peoria. My heart hammered, a frantic tangle of dread and hope, each beat reminding me of what waited ahead. With every passing mile, the worry deepened, coiling tight around my chest as I pictured my tiny daughters, Tammy and Lisa, locked in battle for every breath in that cold, sterile hospital room. Each rise and fall of their chests felt like a small, hard-won battle, a stubborn refusal to give up. The nurses, steadfast angels truly, stayed glued to their sides, unwavering sentinels of care and compassion. There wasn't a moment without the soft whir of machines, the gentle encouragement of a nurse, or the silent pulse of the girl's courage filling the room. Yet somehow, in that exhausting fog of fear and longing, I clung to hope as if my life depended on it. Maybe, just maybe, we'd claw our way out of this darkness. Maybe we'd get our miracle, however small. That afternoon, I drove back to Brenda. She lay quiet, her hand fitting into mine as if by memory, her eyes open but vacant, drifting somewhere I couldn't reach. We sat together in thick silence, heavy, yes, but strangely soothing, until a nurse approached, face unreadable, and asked if I'd step out for a phone call. My heart tripped. Maybe it was one of our parents. Please God, let it be anyone but Peoria. With shaking hands, I picked up the receiver. It was Peoria. The words spilled out, neat and clinical, but they hit me like a sucker punch. Tammy was gone. Her flickering spark of life had vanished in a single day. The voice on the phone offered formal condolences, cold comfort. Then, without pause, "You'll need to contact a funeral home." I was being told to arrange for my daughter's body to be removed. A funeral home? I couldn't even wrap my mind around it. I wanted Tammy buried in Quincy, our hometown. How would I get her there? How could I possibly do this alone? And what if, God forbid, I had to make the same call for Lisa? My mind raced, frantic for answers I didn't have. I could only hope my parents might help me navigate this, but fear chewed away at me. What if I was facing an encore of heartbreak? Clinging to any scrap of time, I asked if Tammy could stay at the hospital for a few days, just until I could figure out what to do. The answer was swift, clipped, and unyielding. No. Maybe it was just the rules, but to me, the voice was arctic, untouched by grief, a bureaucratic wall against my pain. When I finally hung up, the phone felt impossibly heavy, a burden I could barely hold. I stood there hollowed out, staring down a road I had no idea how to travel, except now I had to find a way. Worst of all, I still had to tell Brenda. Brenda was still in a haze, and my words of Tammy's death seemed distant to her narcotic state of mind. I had to stay strong for both of us. It would be years before I knew what was really going on inside her mind. She was worried about me, hiding her grief in an attempt to lessen my load, while otherwise helpless in her own inner grief. Brenda drifted through a fog, my words about Tammy's death barely registering through the narcotic blur clouding her mind. I realized then that I had to be the anchor for both of us, to bear the weight she couldn't carry as she struggled to keep her own head above water. It would take years before I truly understood the storm raging inside her. Even as she reeled from her own heartbreak, Brenda tried to shield me from the worst of it, tucking her grief away in a quiet corner of her heart just to spare me a little pain. Yet, beneath that brave front, she was adrift, helpless against the tide of her own sorrow. When I called my mother back in Quincy, her sorrow echoed through every syllable. Though her voice trembled under the weight of the news, she somehow managed to offer the answers I desperately needed, like only a mother can. With quiet strength, she took charge, calling a local funeral home on my behalf, promising they would reach out to me to help make the impossible plans. Even shaken, her steady, gentle advice cut through my fog, guiding me as I stumbled through the quagmire of funeral arrangements. But despite the chaos, every thought and whispered prayer was still with Lisa, who clung to life with a grip that refused to yield. Sleep became an alien luxury. For 2 days I lived in the limbo of hospital waiting rooms, only nodding off in brief, unsatisfying naps. My world shrank to the endless highway stretches between Bloomington and Peoria, each mile heavy with dread. Hope was a flickering candle guttering in the wind, its only source the sight of Lisa, bravely enduring each moment with a courage that was both breathtaking and heartbreaking. Through the glass window, I could see a little Brenda, her tiny frame squared with defiance against the world as she fought for every breath. But even as I watched, guilt began its relentless assault. Had I failed them? Was it the right choice to send them to Peoria, or had my decision sealed their fate? On July 13th, as the morning sun fought to break through the haze, Lisa lost her battle and joined her sister in heaven. The hospital seemed to exhale in weary resignation. Grief, sharp and unyielding, settled into my bones, demanding answers I knew would never come. All that was left was the echo of my guilt and the memory of Tammy and Lisa's valiant fight, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, love and courage shine through, stubborn and incandescent, refusing to be extinguished. Brenda would remain in the hospital for several weeks, too fragile even to leave her bed, let alone join us for our daughter's funeral. It was a bitter twist. Her heart was breaking, yet her body simply couldn't bear the weight of the trip. So I stood alone, representing both of us, as we said goodbye. That graveside service, well, I doubt I'll ever see anything like it again. The sky itself mourned with us, its clouds swollen and heavy, unleashing rain that felt more like a cascade of tears than a simple summer storm. Along the winding road of the cemetery, at least 100 souls gathered, shoulders hunched beneath a patchwork canopy of umbrellas. There were relatives from both sides of our family tree, friends of both sets of parents, and the steadfast faithful from our church, all brought together by Tammy and Lisa's short, sweet lives. I was only there as long as duty and love demanded, needing to return to Brenda as soon as the last prayer was spoken. Still, the sight of so many people, black umbrellas bobbing, suits and dresses clinging to soaked skin, everyone united in a silent vigil of love and sorrow, left an imprint I'll carry forever. In that moment, the rain washed away any distance between us, and what remained was a display of compassion and shared grief as profound as it was heartbreaking.